All right. Commissioner Notstein, for me, lead us in the pledge and prayer.
Dear Lord, this holiday season, a season when all children believe in the miracles of the season. We ask that you come to the aid of all children of the world who are suffering from cancer, rare diseases, disabilities, and starvation. Give them hope, courage in spirit, and patience in pain. Bring smiles and laughter to them and their families. Heal them, Lord, and bless those who come to their aid. Amen.
Amen.
I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
These proceedings are being recorded for the sole purpose of preparing accurate written minutes. Recordings are overwritten following the approval of the minutes, eliminating all uncertain records of these proceedings. The first item is the approval of the minutes of the previous meeting held December 12th, 2024.
Motion approved.
Second,
Mr. Honor?
Yes.
Mr. Notstein?
yes.
Mr. Sifranco?
Yes. Are there any guests here concerning county business? Hearing none.
The report of executive sessions held.
There was one executive session held on the 18th of December of this year. It was at 10 a.m. in the morning, and it was to discuss personnel.
Our next item is the opening of bid for the Clinton County whole home repair program. These are bids for contract number JL 32-3-137. There's two bidders. Your first bidder is Mozilla Enterprises, Juniper, Pennsylvania. Total on here for the full project. So I am going to say that someone was totaling, and we have to check this, but the total amount is $42,900.
And there's a treasurer's check for security, in the amount of $4,290, which is sufficient.
Next bidder is Northeast Construction Management. Then we'll have to check the totals. The bid amount. $58,206.
And there's a bid bond for 10%.
Motion to table the bids, turn them over to the planning and development for Wardle or rejection at the January 23rd meeting.
I'll second.
Mr. Honor?
Yes.
Mr. Notstein?
Yes.
Mr. Sefranco?
Yes.
Okay. Our next project is contract number LM 5-19-137. Our first bidder is Mozilla Enterprises. Total amount bid $39,800. Your part. Sorry about that.
And there's a treasurer's check for 10%.
Next contractor is Northeast Construction Management Group of Lehighton. Again, total will have to be confirmed. The amount bid, $70,464.
And there's a bid bond for 10%.
Motion to table the bids till January 23rd meeting and turn it over to the planning and development. Recommendation on award or rejection at that meeting.
Second.
Mr. Honor?
Yes.
Mr. Notstein?
Yes.
Mr. Sefranco?
Yes.
And our last project is contract number DH 15-151-137. First bidder Mozilla Enterprises out of Jim Thorpe, Pennsylvania. Going to confirm the total. $42,200.
And there's a treasurer's check for 10%, $4,220.
The next bidder is Mozilla, Northeast Construction Management Group. From Lehighton, PA. Same thing, I need to confirm the total, $46,559.
And there's a bid bond for 10% of the bid.
Motion to table the bid, turn it over to planning and development for award or recommendation for award or rejection of the January 23rd meeting.
Second.
Mr. Honor?
Yes.
Mr. Notstein?
Yes.
Mr. Sefranco?
Yes.
The next item is final adoption of the 2025 budgets. For adoption, 2025 budgets inclusive of the following: operating funds budget totaling $74,575, $575,456. Special funds budget expenditures totaling $9,145,117.
Motion approved.
Second.
Mr. Honor?
No.
Mr. Notstein?
Question again, under discussion is, for the last several years, even dating back, July 27th to last summer, the 23rd, this method passed. You say there were possible 20 positions to be eliminated. You wanted to give people another raise of $500 or 500,000 in salaries for 24, which we did. You have said, you know, many of times that there's, where we should cut funding, but you have yet to come up with any recommendations. Last week's meeting, you voted to take out and proceed with authorizing the financial advisor to solicit quotations to borrow $8 million. But yet you fail to take appropriate actions to pay those bills. I think it's about time you man up and take responsibility for your increases in spending. This past January, at our annual salary board, you made a motion to give everyone 5% increase in raises without approving last year's budget. How can you pay bills if you continue to spend or make recommendations, but you fail to man up and take responsibility to pay those bills? Do you have any answers at this
Well,
time?
the only thing that I'm saying, Wayne, is we keep taxing the taxpayers. And you can look, they came to us, in fact, I think Jeff recommended that we do that tax or the bond, to get us through the year. And we're taking that amount of money out for a bond, but the state owes us 6 million. So last year, we were owed 4 million, this year 6 million. So what are we gonna do? Is next year gonna be 8 million? We gotta put a stop to this, that we start getting our money from the state. I mean, we're behind on payments. That's $6 million that's in here, and we're building the fund balance up to cover for the state. That's my point. I'm not saying that we shouldn't raise taxes because of giving people a wage, but we're just passing to build our fund balance up to cover for the bills that the state does not, or for the money that the state does not give us. I mean, like I said, last year it was like 4.5 million. Now this year it's 6 million, and we're just doing this to cover. I'm not saying that there shouldn't be a tax levy on the people to pay for the wages. I'm all for that. And don't forget, last year we had all that, and I think in the capital fund, we had $200,000 left over. Now, we're even to the end of the year and we're out of money. So we're overspending or something somewhere. And my point is that the state ought to start, and we all sit here and complain about it, that we have unfunded mandates. And then on top of it, they don't give us our money yet. So how do we go to the taxpayer when they were already taxed to the state to get that money, and that money was supposed to be turned over to us? That's my only point. I'm not saying there should not be a tax increase, and you're gonna, because you have insurance going up, wages, yes, I'm all for that. But I'm tired of just covering for the state for 6 million, like I said, 4 million last year, 6 million this year, and what's it gonna be next year? All we do is cover for them, and now we're supposed to have a meeting next week with them. I don't need a meeting. They should have gave us our money. I don't need a meeting to tell them we need our $6 million. And that's my point of this tax levy. We're just doing it to get more of a fund balance that we can protect the state, and I'm just tired of it. I think it's time the state mans up. They should man up. I am.
I agree with what you're saying, but what I'm telling you, you have been operating at a deficit well above what the state owes us for the last 4 or 5 years. That's my argument. You have not been making any moves whatsoever to make up the increased cost of operating county government. That's the problem. I understand what you say, but without the increases, we will not make it. We can't pay our employees, regardless of that $6.2 million. I don't like it either. But without a fund balance, we have nothing to pay the bills between now and tax time in April.
And that's why we're forced into getting a bond. because
No,
like I said,
we are forced
Yeah.
into getting a bond because we had a fund balance to cover our salaries and expenses till June. Or till April when the taxes started coming in. We no longer have that. That's why we have to increase it so much. I will vote yes. Under protest that somebody has to start taking responsibility for voting for these things, but not coming up. You keep saying we gotta cut. Well, I didn't hear anything for the last 2 or 3 years that you've been saying it. I have heard nothing.
I think I've even brought it up like that before. We have 23 vacant spots in children and youth. That's in the budget that we're taxing the people for. So there's a lot through the budget that I brought up before, but I said, my issue is. The state gotta be responsible for giving us our money. That's a majority of our problem. If we would have that $6 million, we wouldn't have to get a note.
Mr.
Yeah.
Sifranco?
The only thing I would like to say is, one is, nobody here wants to raise taxes. And I don't care, and I don't get a pass here, but it's after the first year. I would like to state that we did hold the line. We did end the year with a balance, Jeff, that is going to get us through the start off. It's not that we are financially cash strapped, and that's a fact. Both commissioners here, both Mr. Notstein in reference to the TAN does make sense, because the only way you can prepare a TAN for a tax anticipation note is based on the budget that you approve. So if it's gotta be, it's a double edge. If you vote one way, you gotta vote both ways. So not thing, but that's just the way the TAN works. The TAN is based on your budget. So if you agree with the TAN, you more or less agree with the budget. Mr. Honor is correct with the state. And we've been tracking that. So, I mean, my answer is, like I said, I don't ever want to raise taxes. Unfortunately, that's a necessary evil at times just to meet normal expense, which both agree to. But what I would say, going into my second year here, I would fully expect that we get some motions on the table next year. And maybe those motions are we start shutting down those departments. When we don't have the money, tables need to come in and we need to start making motions and saying, well, those departments or whatever that problem is, then we can't sit here at the end of the year and complain if we didn't take any motions throughout the year. So if we see that we're running behind and not getting what we needed, maybe the answer is the state's not going to listen until those services are no longer provided. I do not wish to take that route. I do not want to take that route. But if that's what it's going to come to, then those decisions have to be made too, and that's a tough decision. And I don't know where we legally stand on what we have to provide, but if that's an issue from the state, then let's make the motion. And unfortunately, that department will have to be shut down until we get the proper money or the funding source or things shifted through. I don't think that's the answer, but
And the problem with that, we don't do it, then they cut off all funding for everything is what you will jeopardize every program, not just one. We've had it before when there was a mistake and it wasn't on our end, they threatened to cut funding and it was a mistake on their end. And that's the problem with your,
Right.
I would like to do that too.
And I know that, so there unfortunately, there's always, the county, everything trickles down and the county is at the end of it, and I don't know, that's why we're trying to have a meeting to try to push that back up. Carbon County is not the only one. If you go around the state, you'll see that, but it doesn't matter what's happening in Pike and Monroe County. What matters is what's happening in Carbon County. So, with that all said, knowing that we'll hold this and we got us back to a balance and, looking to the future and, catching everything up and needing what we need to do and have some faith in us next year, proving on what we did this year together, all three of us, I will cast my vote as yes.
One final comment on that. The positions that were not filled did not cost us anything, because we didn't pay anybody, so that money is still there. And it's still operating at a deficit.
Our next item is budget resolution number 24-047.
Motion on that.
Second,
Mr. Honor?
No.
You know, so,
take responsibility for it. Yes,
Mr. Sifranco?
Yes.
The tax levy resolution number 24-048.
Motion on that.
second,
Mr. Honor?
No.
suggest you take some accounting courses.
Mr. Notstein?
Yes,
Mr. Sifranco?
Yes.
Department reports. The budget transfers.
Motion approved.
Second,
Just checking one thing. Yeah, second.
Mr. Arnold,
Yes.
Mr. Notstein,
Yes,
Mr. Sefranco.
Yes.
on that. Department heads have better step up to the plate, elected officials. Cut the nonsense, just because money's in your budget doesn't mean you can spend it. If you don't need it, don't spend it. I wanna see the overtime cut, especially for certain things where it is not necessary. I think the department heads have to stand up to the plate, step up to the plate. I think some do a very good job, but others have a long way to go.
Supplemental appropriations.
Motion approved.
Second,
Mr. Honor?
Yes.
Mr. Notstein?
yes,
Mr. Sefranco?
Yes.
Expenditures, approval of payroll check numbers 76343 through 76355, and direct deposit check number 6071392 through 6071817 for the payroll paid through the payroll fund checking account for all county funds totaling $682,891.93. This is the payroll dated December 13th, 2024.
Motion to ratify.
second,
Mr. Honor?
Yes.
Mr. Notstein?
yes,
Mr. Sefranco?
Yes.
Approval of check numbers 248047 through 248227 for expenditures to the general fund clearing account totaling $630,451.84.
Motion approved.
second,
Mr. Honor?
Yes.
Mr. Notstein?
yes,
Mr. Sefranco?
Yes.
The treasurer's report.
motion to approve as presented,
Second.
Mr. Honor?
Yes.
Mr. Notstein?
yes,
Mr. Sefranco?
Yes.
The personnel report for county departments.
motion to approve,
Second.
Mr. Honor?
Yes.
Mr. Notstein?
yes,
Mr. Sefranco?
Yes.
The acknowledgements for courts and row offices.
Motion acknowledged.
second,
Mr. Honor?
Yes.
Mr. Notstein?
yes,
Mr. Sefranco?
Yes.
Correspondence was received as listed. Copies will be made available to the press upon request. The first item, communications 911, item number 245805 for approval proposal, Green Communications.
motion to approve,
Second.
Mr. Honor?
Yes.
Mr. Notstein?
yes,
Mr. Sefranco?
Yes.
Item number 24586, proposal from Motorola Solutions.
Motion approved and execute.
second,
Mr. Honor?
Yes.
Mr. Notstein?
yes,
Mr. Sefranco?
Yes.
GIS mapping, item number 24587, a service agreement with Printostat.
Motion approved and execute.
second,
Mr. Honor?
Yes.
Mr. Notstein?
yes,
Mr. Sefranco?
Yes.
Information technology, item number 24588. Johnson Controls, the panic alarm system service.
motion to approve,
Second.
Mr. Honor?
Yes.
Mr. Notstein?
yes,
Mr. Sefranco?
Yes.
Item number 24589, again, the panic alarm system, Johnson Controls. This is for the server.
motion to approve and execute,
Second.
Mr. Honor?
Yes.
Mr. Notstein?
yes,
Mr. Sefranco?
Yes.
Insurance, workers' compensation, item number 24590.
Motion approved.
second,
Mr. Honor?
Yes.
Mr. Notstein?
yes,
Mr. Sefranco?
Yes.
The Sheriff's Department, item number 24591. Johnson Controls Agreement for the camera system.
Motion approved and execute.
second,
Mr. Honor?
Yes.
Mr. Notstein?
yes,
Mr. Sefranco?
Yes.
Solicitor's report.
Thank you. We'll take the first three at once. Items 24-592, 24-593, and 24-594. Seeking motions to approve banner requests from Marion Catholic High School. The Winterfest for the Jim Thorpe Tourist Agency and God's True Vine International Church.
Motion to approve all three?
Second,
Mr. Honor?
Yes.
Mr. Notstein?
yes,
Mr. Sefranco?
Yes.
For Mock Chunk Lake Park, items 24-595 and 24-595, seeking a motion for approval and execution of special activities agreements with the Lenape Nation and St. John's Lutheran Church.
596, the second one.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes, as amended.
Motion motion approved and executed,
Second.
Mr. Honor?
Yes.
Mr. Notstein?
yes,
Mr. Sefranco?
Yes.
Next, resolutions, item 24-597, seeking a motion to adopt resolution 49 of 2024, recognizing retired Carbon County Emergency Management Coordinator Mark Nalesnik as the 2024 Black Diamond Award recipient.
Motion to ratify resolution?
second,
Mr. Honor?
Yes.
Mr. Notstein?
yes,
Mr. Sefranco?
Yes.
And item 24-598, seeking a motion to adopt resolution 50 of 2024, recognizing retired Lansford Police Chief Jack Severick as the 2024 Black Diamond Award recipient.
Motion to ratify resolution?
second,
Mr. Honor?
Yes.
Mr. Notstein?
yes,
Mr. Sefranco?
Yes.
Nothing further for the solicitor report.
Any further business? Commissioners reports, Mr. Honor?
Nothing at this time.
Mr. Notstein?
yes, I want to wish everyone a very Merry Christmas, safe, happy holiday, fun Christmas. We'll see you next Thursday, and wish you a happy New Year at that time.
I think so.
Mr. Sefranco?
I would just like to, I know at times you see things, but one thing you may want, I always like to draw attention to what commissioners are doing, because all too often it gets out there what they, and one thing you may want to note is on the agenda today, you'll see where there were some home repair grants. I don't think we've seen that in quite a while here, come down the chute or on the table. And a lot of that was due to the changes that we had made earlier in the year, how we adjust the amount of paperwork as we've talked about. So and that is definitely moving in the right direction, that we're able to get some people bidding. And we haven't seen those awards in quite some time. So while as frustrating as it gets, it may seem, and as Rocky had just told me here, we are always looking for contractors to bid on those projects and follow the timelines, because that's what makes it tough. But I think by the three of us working together, while we may disagree on some issues that you saw here earlier today, we do agree that the county needs to move in the right direction. And we do at times disagree, but we do move along well. And I do want to thank everyone for that, especially Commissioner Notstein and Warner as I sit here between. The other thing I'd like to note is, while you hear all this debate back and forth about employees and things, one thing you would want to note is what will happen next year is the county has basically froze hiring of all new full-time employees. There will be no hiring of any more full-time employees. However, clarifying that for the press, if someone would resign that's currently in a full-time position, the Board of Commissioners and or the department head will evaluate that position and determine whether or not we need to fill that position at that time. So I would like to I know the taxpayers may see we'll make some cuts. Well, right there's one that we're trying to hold the line on it and pull back in, following what Commissioner Notstein had said here earlier. Other than that, as much as I'd like to wish you all a very Merry Christmas. And we'll see you next week, the day after Christmas. I understand we do have a meeting, so enjoy your evening, but be up early. With that, I hear nothing further. Meeting adjourned. We will now move to the retirement board. I know we have. Okay. Kayla?
Approval of the minutes of the previous meeting held November 21st, 2024.
Motion approved?
Second,
Mr. Zelenka,
Yes.
Mrs. Herman, yes. Mr. Arner,
Yes.
Mr. Notstein,
yes,
Mr. Sefranco.
Yes.
Any guests concerning? There we go. There were no executive sessions held. A motion to ratify warrant checks number 41112 to 41120 and direct deposit number 7029472 to 7029894 for November.
Motion ratified.
Second.
Mr. Zelinka,
Yes.
Mrs. Herman? Yes. Mr. Arner?
Yes.
Mr. Notstein?
Yes.
Mr. Sefranco?
Yes.
November's activity report, there was 3 retirement refunds, 2 superannuation retirements, 2 deceased on behalf of the retirement board. We offer our condolences to the family of Joyce Nepper and Barbara Yothers. Disbursements for November, monthly benefits, $511,482.30. Refunds, $38,456.14, for a total disbursement of $549,938.44. The portfolio value as of November 30th was $93,957,128.65. There were no correspondence received. Anything for the solicitor's report?
Nothing to report.
And today we have our investment manager, Sarah Wilson from Marquette Associates, joining us via Zoom.
Good morning. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. It's great to be here. What we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about the economy and we're going to go through it. And obviously everybody knows the Fed met yesterday, so it's going to be a bit of a change. So I do believe you have all of your books. And we are going to go to Exhibit 2. And we'll go to page 9. All right, the U.S. economy. So right there, we look at what's happened. And you remember, lots of things change. We've seen this ever-moving market. But to really, truly understand the performance of the quarter, you have to understand what happened in the quarter. So we look at the U.S. economy, economic growth remained solid in the third quarter, and GDP increased at an annual rate of 2.4. But what we have started to see are signs of consumer stress. Consumer delinquency expectations are at the highest level since April 2020. Interestingly enough, though, when we saw the data come in from Black Friday and Cyber Monday, they were all-time records. So the consumer is still spending out there, which is kind of holding up a little more of the economy there. We saw what's happening in fiscal policy. We'll talk a little bit about the Fed, but a large part of what's really going into the economy is government spending. And look at the page 9. Look at where we go at the U.S. payroll growth. Construction's at 1.9, utilities 1.8, and education and health services are 1.69. Now, we have seen a retraction in health services, but construction utilities, we're going to see that large part is government spending in infrastructure. And as we know, the board made a very good decision a while back to diversify in infrastructure. And that has been a nice inflation hedge. And we'll talk a little bit about that when we look at performance. We turn the page to page 10. And we look at the labor market versus inflation. The payroll employment rate showed a welcome increase in monthly job gains in September, but then we also have seen a decline in the unemployment rate. Interestingly enough, what we're starting to see on that top chart is job openings versus unemployment rate and the core inflation. So core inflation spiked and we saw job openings go down. What has happened, though, when we have to understand about job openings is that, in October, we saw them add very little jobs in the employment market. So we go back to 2020. We know that, there was many job openings when the economy opened back up. And many businesses had a very hard time filling those positions. So we saw a lot of small businesses close, especially in the restaurant industry, the food industry. And then what we've also seen in the last year is that if you had 3 jobs, they're now becoming 1 job. So the market has become very tight when we talk about that. And then we go to short-term interest rates at the bottom. And this is interesting. So look at the here, and then we'll update what's happened. We look at where they thought the decline. So what happened with the Fed is we know that when they did that cut in September, we thought the Fed was going to probably cut more in next year. And yesterday, the Fed came back and said that they're going to be much more conservative in their cuts and that they actually only expect to see 2.25% cuts next year. And we know the market reacted very negatively to this. And we know the market has bounced back. It's had a tremendous volatility this year. But yesterday, the Dow hit an all-time losing streak, the longest losing streak since 1974. So when we look at what's happening in the Fed, we also know that the committee is expected unemployment rate this year to 4.2. And what they want to do is, remember they kept on saying they wanted core inflation at 2%. They pushed that a little bit higher because they see inflation is really not coming down to where they want it to be. So now they're going to say, they're going to look at 2.4 versus 2.8% is going to be the gauge. They are projecting to eventually go down to that 3%, but we are not going to see that for another 18 to 24 months. And I really think with what the Fed had came back out and saying is that we knew they weren't going to cut as fast as we liked, but we still had priced in more cuts next year. So that is going to come back to the consumer. Obviously, it's going to come back to inflation, and it's also going to come back to the consumer with debt, because the higher the interest rates, that is also going to put pressure on small to mid cap stocks, and especially emerging market stocks, because small caps and mid cap stocks need to be able to borrow to do well there. If you look at page 11, though, we have seen economic growth has slowed a little bit in Europe. They have done cuts, which has been very helpful. Remember, in Europe, it's very hard because the prices of housing is so high. They have adjustable rate mortgages, meaning that they go up and down. So the consumer is constantly having a rate change on them. We have seen in China, interestingly enough, at the bottom of page 11, you do see that China is just throwing in a bunch of stimulus after they're trying to recover from 2020 COVID. Remember, they got another bounce back. And we have to keep in mind that China is our biggest exporter out. So when we look at that, we also look at stimulus. So China, we're going to see, is going to maybe be struggling for the next couple of years. If we turn to page 12 on a good note, I always hate to be a little bit negative. This is the first time we have actually seen all the asset classes in positive territory for about the last 14 months. So we look at U.S. equities. They had a great return for the quarter, 6.2. They returned for the year, September to September, 35.2. We've seen non-U.S. equities, 7.3%. U.S. bonds, which is really nice to see. Remember, in 2022, they were an all-time low, hit negative double digits for the first time since the bond aggregate index was formed in 1970. So it's really nice to see bonds at 5.2 and for the trailing 12 months, 11.6. And we look at global infrastructure, as I just mentioned, infrastructure has done very well. It's done 13.5. And remember, you actually diversified and put some of your fixed income to that, and that has done really well. We look at U.S. REITs. We're starting to see the real estate coming back. We know that we've seen housing this month posted. More people are getting mortgages when we sit there and we see lower rates there. When we look at page 13, we look at what is happening with the sector returns, and we have to keep in mind still driving this has been the mega caps, so 7 to 9 companies. But we have seen in the last couple of weeks, NVIDIA has taken a step back. Remember, Apple in second quarter was negative, and then we saw Google struggling in the third quarter. What that means is we saw value stocks, and we know that we take a little bit of a value tilt, which you want to do in a pension fund to protect you on the downside, and value outperformed. Even though it was an up market, it was very volatile. And when we see volatility in the market, we see more investors going to the value there. And we also expect that we're going to start seeing those mega caps. As last quarter we talked about, those earnings are going to come down and the market's going to start getting driven more diversified, which is going to be good. And we have to keep in mind when we look at performance in the next couple minutes is that the market, those small mid cap companies have a very hard time when they are not holding those mega caps versus their benchmark. Let's turn the page. And we'll talk a little bit about the fourth quarter and presidential election years. And I think this was very interesting. After this election day, remember, we saw this unbelievable spike in the market. But when you really, and it's actually kind of calmed down a little bit. And this is since 1984. And this is what we're kind of hoping to expect this quarter. Remember, we did this at the end of September. We look at that. Prior to the election day, it's about 0.35, the return October 1st. Day after the election day to December 31st is 2.33. And for the fourth quarter, it averages about 2.47. That's an average of what's happened. When we look at that, we have to go look at the bottom as well, that chart. And we look at that chart and we look at year 4, the probability of a positive return, 75%. And we look, the average return is about 7.5% there for the fourth year. We're above that through September. And we're hoping to, to see come out as a double digit. We are going to have to watch the markets. We do have a couple more days. Today, the market has bounced back and probably will bounce back. We're going to see a lot more volatility. The VIX, which is a measurement of volatility within the market, has really gone up and down there. And so we just have to be kind of more prepared to see that there. Are there any questions about the market? All right, let's turn to Exhibit 3. And we're going to talk a little bit about how you did. And that is page 23. And you can see September 30th, the ending market value is 93.7. As Kayla mentioned, the ending market value in end of November was 93 million as well. But remember, you have pulled out money since then. You had a return of 5.6 versus a relative benchmark of 5.3. Remember, we always talk, it's when value outperforms, you'll see some outperformance, and you had a net gain of 5 million. Year to date, you returned 12.3 versus the relative benchmark of 12.1 and had a net gain of 10.3 million. And then since inception, you've annualized 9.2, well exceeding your actuarial assumption, and net investment gain of 37 million. And that is really good news for this pension fund. And remember, net is net of our fees, net of all the manager fees. So that's your true return. When we look at that, we also look at the attribution for the value tilt, infrastructure, and U.S. fixed income manager, CS McKee, as always, has done very well as your active manager. We'll look at negative attribution. We'll talk a little bit about GWK's, just small cap that's just been struggling. And then we also look at Harding Loevner, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that, and your low investment fees of 32 basis points. And then looking ahead, we'll probably do this next quarter, we'll review the county database. Are there any questions so far? All right, let's go and turn to page 30. And we're just going to talk a little bit about how your managers did. And we look at GWK, they're your active manager within the U.S. equity composite. And they just a little bit struggled, but for the trailing 12 months, they did 24%. It was just a little bit of stock pick. And it's very hard to measure them against a 2,500 index, all those stocks. So we look at them, we're very comfortable with them. We've had them in a lot of portfolios and they've done very well. We look at the global equities and we look at Artisan Global Opportunities. Remember, we talked about them last quarter, and remember, they were the #1 performing manager in their space, but they had some underperformance there. And they've actually come back 4.3 versus 4.1. We look at MFS low volatility year to date did 17.7 versus 15.4. And then we talk a little bit about the non-US equity composite returned 7.8 for the quarter. Year to date, it did 13.1. And I just want to point out Harding and Loevner, just so you know, we have 2 research analysts on them. We've met with them. We met with the 2 portfolio managers last year. And as they've come back closer for the 3 months, year to date, they really struggled. They hold 2 positions in healthcare that really underperformed. And when we talked to the portfolio managers, they said that they were comfortable with those positions and they were going to hold them. They didn't want to sell them at an all-time low. Just so you know, we are looking at them and we are looking at possibilities to replace them. We don't feel like we need to do it right now and put an index in there, and we're just watching them very closely. DFA emerging markets, you've only had them since April 24th, but they've done 12.6. If we turn the page to page 32, we're going to look at defensive equity, did 3.2, year to date 13.2. Real estate's come back in for the month. Year to date, you can see it's negative. The one good thing is Morgan Stanley Prime Property Fund has done extremely well through this very volatile time on real estate. And remember, this fund only has pension funds investing in this. So they are very cognizant of that. And you can see that they were only down for 1 year, 3.5 versus 8%. We know real estate's going to come back. Remember, real estate in 2022, when fixed income was down double digits, equity was down double digits, real estate was the #1 performing asset class. We look that they have annualized, since we put them in, 4.7. They actually pay a nice dividend and we're very comfortable. Remember, this is a long-term investment. Infrastructure has done very well for you. For the quarter, they did 3.8. And 1 year they did 6.6. You put them in February, and then we put you in an IFM Global Infrastructure. We made a change. And since that inception, since January of 2023, they've done 7.3%. Fixed income, as I said, CS McKee did 5.3. For the year, they did 12.7 versus 11.6. But I really want, even though they've outperformed, look at that since inception, 2.6 versus 2.4. And that is why you've done a great job when we re-diversified this portfolio and put defensive equity in, we put infrastructure in, we put real estate in, and you also went to a discretionary OCIO. That has really benefited the fund. So as a board, you've done very, very well. And then we look at Baird Core Plus Fund. We put them in June 22. We just wanted a little bit more of an active manager as well. You've got 2 active managers, and especially in this interest rate environment, it has made sense. 1 year they've done 12.8 versus 11.6. Are there any questions?
No.
Well, I think you're in good shape. I think next year is, going to be, we're going to sit back. We're going to see what happens with the Fed cuts. We're going to go look at, we still have the Ukraine going on. We've got the Middle East. We've got oil is also in play right now. So there's a lot of dynamics. And then we also have a new administration and, standing back and looking at that every presidential election. You always have some market volatility in the beginning. It doesn't matter who got in. We're just going to look at that. They will be watching. The market will be looking for fiscal policy and to see what gets through and what does not get through. But I think you're in good shape. And I think it's really important to remember that you have consistently annualized your annual rate of returns 9.2. So you're outperforming that rate that you've got of 7%. So you've done very well there. When you look at that annualized return, it means that your pension fund's very, very healthy. Are there any questions?
Thank you very
Right.
much. Any questions?
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Okay, I want to thank you all. I wish you a happy new year, a wonderful holiday season. And again, thank you so much for letting me zoom in. I enjoyed seeing some of you at the CCAP, and I look forward to seeing you in spring. Again, if you should have any questions, please feel free to always contact me.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Anything under new business or old business? No? Any further business? Adjourn.
Thank you. That will. Starting the, last week we started up front, didn't we?
Okay, well, so you mentioned possibly next year having to look at, shutting down different departments. And based off of what you guys have said in the past, it seems like children and youth and aging are the ones that the state is usually lagging on. Are those the ones you were thinking about possibly shutting down?
Well, I think you need to really listen to that, and as I had said, that's, that's an option you can always say, but as you heard from one commissioner, what happens when you do that, the state begins withholding other money. So we're kind of stuck in between what they would call a rock and a hard place here. As much as you'd like to say, shut it down and stop the,
And I don't think that was not my intent at all, was shutting it down. We gotta get a claim on the state of giving us our money. That's the bottom line.
and there's just,
There is no other issue.
but there is no way around that other, how do you do it?
And first of all, you couldn't shut children and youth down, and you couldn't shut aging down. And that's why we're gonna maybe get a bond to cover us for next year. But I said, them coming in here, and I said, even our startup that we get in June, when we get our startup, is that in June, Ellie? That's even held up. Why would there be an issue with money that they should have sent to us? Now, if there's bills that are coming in, that there's that discretion with it, that's a little bit different. But this startup money is included in this $6 million that they owe us. That should be sent no matter what, and if the date is supposed to be June 25th, that's when we should get it. And I think we just gotta start holding the line and make them responsible for it.
The other problem, we shut it down, they come in, they take over, you still pay the bills.
So that's why I'm saying, if you want to shut down, you come in here and make motions to do that, but there's no, it's a motion that's mute. That's not the solution. So if I misled you on that one, I didn't, maybe I need to explain that a little bit more, but that's why I both say. That's not. And in reference to it, you gotta understand, and both commissioners make a valid point here, is the state gives you money ahead. And then you hear this 30 days and we're waiting on money from the state, and then the state said it's the county's paperwork. Well, I just don't understand if we're allocated so much money every quarter, why we don't receive that money. And then toward the end of the year, square it all up. Where are the issues and audit it, and that's what's owed or back or whatever. But it's every quarter, it's like you heard earlier, the first one's tied to the third and the second one's tied to the fourth. And we're always shuffling money to try to keep it.
We point something else out. If you look at today's agenda, the expenditures, approval of payroll checks for the payroll dated December 13th, $682,891. Okay? Between now, or let's say from January 1 to April sometime, when we start getting taxes in, at least, I'd say at least 7 payrolls at almost 700,000. So what's that? Almost $5 million just in payroll. And you wonder why we need a fund balance. That doesn't pay for the electric, it doesn't pay for the gas and the oil. doesn't pay for the mileage for the vehicles, doesn't pay the lease agreements for the vehicles. None of that is included. That just payroll is almost $5 million between now and April, mid-April, let's say.
That's all I have.
And the key off of that, what Commissioner Notstein has said is one thing that the county obviously, S&P came in and dropped our rating. So anyone who understands finance, when your rating goes down, your rates go up. So the money, whether you borrow it, but it costs more now to go get money. So they look at, and I can't control that either, but S&P looks at what's in the fund balance. And I don't know, Jeff, maybe you can help me out with, usually the number percentage they look to have off to some time, to kind of keep where you're at
10 to 15%.
of the total budget is what should be budgeted to be off to the side for us to maintain where we were. And obviously we've fallen below that. Now, I don't set those numbers, neither do we, are there these two commissioners. But S&P comes up with that number and that hurts the county's rating. So when you get that fund balance, I don't want to have, I'd love to be, that we don't need the fund balance either, but we get hit from all angles. But we know that, and that we need to find a way to work through. I'm running.
With regards to that, what is the current S&P for Carbon County?
Jeff, we'll give it to you.
I'm gonna have to look.
Okay.
Because
Kevin, do you remember that letter?
Everybody will
I don't wanna misspeak, so I can look it up.
We'll give you the
before
number.
you leave.
Thank you. And in regard to the hiring freeze for full-time employees, is that for just any new positions? Or is that vacant positions as well? How does that?
That would be all for all new positions.
All new.
All new positions. There are
I
no,
would even look, if somebody retires, I would even encourage, some departments, I would say, you're gonna have to do it up.
Okay. Yeah, the reason I'm asking is with, Commissioner Arner saying about 23 vacancies in children in need, so those you can still fill? Since,
We're looking at possibility of eliminating a few of those
Okay.
positions in the upcoming salary board. We've had those discussions, how many can we, eliminate? We can't fill them, why have them on the hook?
Mhm.
any other thing is, try to explain a little bit. Children and Youth submits a budget to the state, which is obviously approved, and they put a certain number of positions in. If those positions aren't filled, we're not paying for it. But that bottom line, the number is still there. So we have to prove the money's there, but not, the whole thing needs to be sit down and really just discuss, and a real big deep dive has to be made as to how much personnel do we really need.
And then in regards to the 911, two motions on 911, is that part of the digital changeover
Yes.
transactions?
Yes.
And I believe that's it. Thank you, gentlemen. Merry Christmas.
Anything else? Very good. Enjoy your weekend. We'll see you all day after Christmas. Thank you.